My entire family sat frozen as Melissa, my brother Tyler's fiancée, stared at her phone in disbelief. Wait, you're that Olivia Bennet? The one who designed the Anderson Tower? Suddenly, 20 years of being called the family failure shattered. In one Google search at our rehearsal dinner. I still remember how the air seemed to crystallize in that moment, suspended between two realities, the one where I was invisible and the new one forming right before my eyes. Has your family ever completely misjudged who you really are? If you're watching from somewhere your family made you feel small, hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey of recognition that took 34 years to arrive. Let me take you through the exact moment when my family's perception of me shattered like glass and the aftermath that changed everything. Growing up as Olivia Bennet, I learned early that middle children truly do get forgotten. At 34, I've built a successful career as an architect under my pseudonym OB Designs, a decision made deliberately to separate my professional success from my family's persistent undermining. My brother Tyler, 36, has always been the golden child, the firstborn son who followed our father into finance. My younger sister Emma, 30, became the baby of the family who could do no wrong, even when she dropped out of college. Twice before settling into a mediocre marketing job. Our parents, Richard and Diana Bennet, never tried to hide their favouritism. Dad would beam with pride showing off Tyler's Little League trophies while my art competition medals collected. Dust in a drawer. Mum would spend hours helping Emma with school projects, while I was told to figure it out yourself, Olivia. You're supposed to be the smart one. I still remember my high school graduation when I was announced as valedictorian. While other parents cheered wildly for their children, mine merely nodded and then immediately turned to discuss Tyler's upcoming law school graduation. It's just high school, my mother said dismissively when I showed her my speech. Tyler's becoming a lawyer. That's something to really celebrate. Every achievement came with a diminishment. When I got accepted to Cornell's architecture program, with a full scholarship, my father frowned and said, "Architecture? That's just drawing buildings. Why not medicine or law? Something practical." Even as I excelled in college, graduating summa cum laude, my family treated my education as some kind of expensive hobby. Christmas dinners became battlegrounds where Tyler's internship at a prestigious firm dominated conversation, while my design award was mentioned as an afterthought, if at all. "Oh, Olivia's still drawing her little buildings," my father would tell relatives, as if I were a child with crayons rather than a professional creating actual structures where people lived and worked. After years of fighting for recognition, I made a conscious decision during my second year of graduate school. I would stop seeking their approval. I would build my life and career separate from their perceptions. When I began working at Schaefer and Associates in Chicago, I introduced myself professionally as OB Bennet, which eventually became the brand OB Designs. My decision to use a pseudonym wasn't just about privacy from clients, it was about creating a wall between my successful, professional identity and my family's dismissive perception. In client meetings, I was a rising star. At family gatherings, I was still the underachiever who drew buildings. The irony grew as my career flourished. By 30, I had led the design team on 3 major commercial projects. By 32, I was heading my own division. All while my family continued to ask when I was going to get a real job or finally settle down like my siblings. Now, approaching my father's 60th birthday dinner, I found myself dreading the familiar patterns. I had just completed the Anderson Tower project, a $200 million skyscraper that had been featured in Architectural Digest. My design was being praised as innovative and genre-defining, yet I knew that at dinner I would once again be relegated to the role of underachieving middle child, while Tyler's recent promotion and Emma's new condo would be treated as earth-shattering accomplishments. I packed my bag for the weekend trip home to Boston with a familiar weight in my chest. Hidden in my luggage was the latest issue of Architectural, Design with my work on the cover, a magazine I knew would never make it out during family dinner. The contrast between my professional and personal worlds couldn't be more stark. In Chicago, I was Olivia Bennett of OB Designs, the architect whose revolutionary approach to sustainable urban spaces had transformed the downtown skyline. My office overlooked Michigan Avenue, and industry leaders sought meetings with me, not the other way around. The Anderson Tower had been my breakthrough. When Westfield Development approached our firm 3 years ago with a vision for a sustainable, mixed-use skyscraper, I fought to lead the project, despite being younger than most architects typically assigned to such high-profile work. This isn't just about designing another tall building, I had told the board during my pitch. This is about creating a vertical community that changes how people experience urban living. I won the project by showing them my portfolio, work my family had never bothered to see. For 36 months, I poured everything into that design, working 18-hour days, sacrificing weekends, relationships, even my health at times. The result was a 60-story masterpiece of glass, steel, and green technology that generated 30% of its own energy and incorporated vertical gardens throughout its structure. When the tower was completed last month, the mayor attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. My photo appeared in the Chicago Tribune, the Wall Street Journal, and specialized architecture publications worldwide. Industry blogs called it a career-defining achievement. 3 universities had asked me to give guest lectures, yet not one family member had called to congratulate me, despite the coverage. I had tried sharing my success before. During Emma's college graduation, I mentioned a small office building I had designed that had won a regional award. "That's nice, dear," my mother said, barely glancing up from arranging Emma's graduation photos. "Did you hear Tyler's firm is handling the Westbrook merger? $50 million, now that's impressive." Another time, I sent my parents photos of a community centre I designed that had been built in an underserved neighbourhood. "Pretty building," my father commented in his email reply, before immediately pivoting to 5 paragraphs about Tyler's new BMW. After each dismissal, I retreated further into separation. I stopped mentioning projects. I declined to correct their assumptions about my career. When they asked about that drafting job, I gave vague answers. On the rare occasions when architecture came up in family conversations, I downplayed my role, knowing any success would either be dismissed or somehow turned into a comparison where I would be found wanting. The morning before leaving for Boston, my boss called with news that would have had anyone else shouting from the rooftops. "Olivia, the Singapore Plaza Committee reviewed your preliminary designs. They want to fast-track the project with you. As lead architect, we're talking about a $350 million development. This would put you in the international arena." I thanked him, accepted the project, and then told absolutely no one as I packed for my father's birthday weekend. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't forget Dad's birthday dinner is at Ravello's tomorrow at 7. Wear something nice for once. Tyler just made partner and everyone will be dressed to celebrate." I stared at the message for a long moment before putting my recent Architect of the Year award back in its box and tucking it under my bed where it had lived since the ceremony. The drive from Boston Logan International to my parents' Brookline home felt like travelling backward in time. Each familiar landmark seemed to strip away layers of my hard-won identity, replacing the confident architect with the overlooked middle child. I passed 3 buildings I had always admired growing up, the very structures that had inspired my career choice, and wondered what my life would have been like if my family had nurtured my passion rather than dismissing it. My mother answered the door with a quick, perfunctory hug. "You're late. Everyone's already here. Tyler brought his new fiancée and you need to meet her before dinner." No, "How was your flight?" or "Good to see you." Just immediate redirection. To the family favourite. "Nice to see you too, Mom," I said, carrying my own bag inside while she had already turned away, calling out to someone in the living room. The house was filled with extended family, uncles, aunts, cousins, all gathered. for Dad's milestone birthday. I made my way through a gauntlet of superficial greetings and thinly veiled assessments. Still not married? Your biological clock isn't getting any younger. From Aunt Patricia. Chicago, huh? Not exactly New York or London, is it? From Uncle Stephen, as if my choice of city somehow indicated a lack of ambition. Drawing buildings? Still paying the bills. From Cousin Mark, with that particular tone that suggested he was surprised I could support myself at all. Each interaction reinforced the family narrative. Tyler was the successful one, Emma was the precious one, and I was, well, just Olivia, the one who hadn't quite lived up to expectations. I spotted Tyler across the room, his arm around a petite woman with curly auburn hair, who I assumed was Melissa, his new fiancée. They were surrounded by an admiring circle of relatives, all leaning in to catch whatever important insights the golden child might dispense about the financial markets. My father intercepted me before I could reach the bar. "Olivia, you made it." He gave me a brief, distracted hug. "Still drawing your little buildings out in Chicago?" Not waiting for an answer, he continued. "Tyler just made partner at Harrison, and Weil, youngest partner in the firm's history, and he's brought his fiancée, brilliant girl, works in medical research. You should talk to her about getting into a more serious field." I bit back the retort that architecture was, in fact, a serious field, and that my little buildings included a $200 million skyscraper currently changing Chicago's skyline. Instead, I smiled tightly and headed for the wine. Emma cornered me by the kitchen, bubbling with excitement about her recent promotion to junior marketing manager and the one-bedroom condo she had just purchased. "It's in Somerville, not exactly downtown, but the location is up and coming," she gushed. "I have so many design ideas. Maybe you could give me some tips since you do that interior decorating thing." "I'm an architect, Emma. I design buildings, not interiors," I corrected gently, knowing it would make no difference. "Same thing, basically," she waved dismissively. "Anyway, Mum and Dad are helping with the down payment. They're so supportive. Did you need their help when you bought your place?" I hadn't. My Chicago loft had been purchased entirely with my own money, earned from the bonus I received after completing a major hotel project. But I knew mentioning that would either be met with disbelief or somehow diminished. "I managed," I said simply, taking another sip of wine. Eventually, I made my way to Tyler and Melissa. My brother gave me the same cursory hug everyone else had offered. "Liv, this is my fiancée, Melissa Chen. Melissa, my sister Olivia. She lives in Chicago, does something with buildings." I extended my hand to Melissa, who seemed genuinely pleased to meet me. "It's architecture, actually. Nice to meet you, Melissa." "Architecture? That's fascinating. What kind of buildings do you work on?" she asked, with what seemed like genuine interest. Before I could answer, Tyler laughed. "Don't get her started, or she'll bore you with talk about door frames and window placements all night." Melissa frowned slightly at Tyler, but the moment was interrupted by my mother announcing it was time to leave for the restaurant. As we gathered our things, Melissa fell into step beside me. "I've always been interested in architecture," she said quietly. "My father is a structural engineer, so I grew up around building plans." For the first time since arriving, I felt a small connection with someone. "What kind of projects does he work on?" "Recently he consulted on the Anderson Tower in Chicago. Do you know it? It's this amazing new skyscraper with—" "Melissa, come on!" Tyler called from the front door. "You're riding with us." She gave me an apologetic smile and hurried away, leaving me with the surreal knowledge that her father had likely worked on my building without any idea that the lead architect was his future brother-in-law's supposedly underachieving sister. Ravello's was Boston's newest upscale Italian restaurant, the kind with hand-painted murals, imported marble, and prices that made you wince. Dad had always preferred steakhouses, but Mum had insisted on Italian because it photographs better. For the family pictures. The seating arrangement was no accident. Tyler and Melissa directly beside my parents, with Emma on Mum's other side. I was relegated to the far end of the table, between Aunt Patricia and Cousin Mark, as far from the centre of attention as possible, while still technically being at the same table. The waiter had barely taken our drink orders when Tyler cleared, his throat tapping his knife against his water glass in that self-important way he'd perfected since childhood. "Before we get started, I'd like to make a toast," he announced. "Not only to Dad's 60th, but I have some news. Harrison and Weil has officially named me partner, the youngest in the firm's 90-year history." The table erupted in applause, and congratulations. My father's face glowed with the special pride he reserved exclusively for Tyler's achievements. "That's my boy," Dad beamed, clapping Tyler on the shoulder. "Always knew you'd make it to the top. Bennett men always do." Mum was already on her phone, posting the news to Facebook before the champagne had even been poured. "We need to get pictures of you by the partners plaque when it goes up," she insisted, "and we should plan a special celebration dinner just for this." The next 20 minutes were consumed with questions about Tyler's promotion, how much his salary would increase, what new responsibilities he would have, which company executives had personally congratulated him. Each detail was met with rapt attention and appropriate sounds of amazement. When that topic finally exhausted itself, Emma seized her moment. "I have news too. I closed on my condo yesterday, and I got that promotion to junior marketing manager." More applause, more congratulations, though notably less enthusiastic than for Tyler's announcement. Still, my parents beamed. "Look at our little Emma, all grown up with her own place," Mom gushed. "We'll need to help you decorate. I'm thinking a nice soft blue for the living room." The conversation shifted to Emma's condo, her promotion, her office politics, her dating prospects with the new account executive who had just joined her team. I sat quietly, sipping my wine and responding to occasional questions directed my way with brief answers. Years of experience had taught me that elaborating only invited dismissal or redirection. "And how's your little drawing job, Olivia?" "Uncle?" Robert asked during a brief lull, with the slightly condescending tone reserved for children's make-believe occupations. "It's fine," I replied, not bothering to correct his characterization. "Busy with projects." "Still at that same company? What was it, Schumer and something?" "Schaefer and Associates," I corrected. "Huh, not looking to move up to something more substantial. Tyler's firm sometimes needs people for their real estate division. Not architects, of course, but maybe something administrative you could grow into." I smiled tightly, imagining how he would react if he knew I was currently negotiating the contract for a project nearly twice the size of his entire investment portfolio. "I'm happy where I am, thanks." The conversation quickly returned to Tyler's partnership and the family vacation my parents were planning to celebrate both his promotion and their upcoming 40th wedding anniversary. "We're thinking the south of France," my mother announced. "Tyler's bonus can help cover the villa rental." As the main courses arrived, my father launched into stories about Tyler's childhood achievements and Emma's adorable antics, carefully skipping any memory that featured me prominently. It was as if the family history had been edited to minimize my presence, reducing me to a background character in our shared past. I noticed Melissa watching me throughout dinner with a curious expression. Unlike everyone else, she seemed to be observing the family dynamics with fresh eyes. Once or twice, she tried to include me in the conversation, only to have her efforts subtly redirected by Tyler or my mother. "So, Olivia," she said during a momentary pause as dessert menus were being distributed, "Tyler mentioned you work in architecture. What kind of buildings do you typically design?" The table fell into one of those brief expectant silences that occurs when someone asks about a topic the group has tacitly agreed to ignore. My father chuckled. "Don't get her started on those blueprints and models. She's been obsessed with building since she was little. Used to make these elaborate block towers while Tyler was winning debate championships." "Just commercial stuff," I said quietly, giving Melissa the simplest answer possible. Commercial like office buildings? Retail? I find the whole field fascinating, she persisted, ignoring the signals from my family that this was not a topic of interest. Tyler laughed uncomfortably. Melissa, trust me, it's not that exciting. Olivia just draws up plans for renovations. And small office buildings. Nothing you'd recognise. Something in his dismissive tone must have triggered Melissa's curiosity. She tilted her head slightly. What's the name of your firm again? Maybe I've seen some of your work. Schaefer and Associates, I repeated, aware that everyone at the table was now shifting uncomfortably. And do you work under your own name, or does the firm put the lead architect's name on projects? She asked. I hesitated, feeling the weight of my family's attention. For years, I had maintained the separation between OB Designs and Olivia. Bennett, the disappointing middle child. But something about Melissa's genuine interest made me answer honestly. I design under OB Designs. It's a professional name I use. Melissa's eyes widened slightly. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. OB Designs? As in Olivia Bennett Designs? I nodded, a strange sensation building in my chest as I realised what was about to happen. Wait a minute, Melissa said, staring at her phone in growing disbelief. Then she looked up at me, her expression transformed. Wait, you're that Olivia Bennett? The one who designed the Anderson Tower? The table fell completely silent. I could feel everyone's eyes shifting between Melissa's astonished face and my own carefully neutral expression. If you've ever been underestimated your entire life, you'll understand the strange mix of vindication and heartbreak I felt in that moment. While Melissa scrolled through her phone, showing everyone pictures of my work, I found myself wondering, what does it say about your family when a stranger has to Google you for them to recognise your worth? I'd love to know if any of you have experienced that moment when someone outside your family circle suddenly made your relatives see you differently. Hit that like button if you've ever been truly seen by someone when your own family missed who you really are. The Anderson Tower? My father repeated blankly, the name clearly meaning nothing to him. Melissa nodded enthusiastically, turning her phone screen toward the table. Yes, it's this incredible 60-story skyscraper in downtown Chicago. It's been all over the architectural magazines. My dad actually worked on the structural engineering for it. I can't believe I didn't make the connection earlier. She tapped and swiped through her phone, then held it up to show a professional photograph of the gleaming tower with its distinctive cascading terraces of greenery and innovative spiral design. See? OB Designs. That's Olivia. The building just won the Brenner Award for Innovative Urban Architecture. It's like meeting a celebrity, Melissa continued, her excitement building as my family sat in stunned silence. Tyler reached for the phone, his forehead creased in confusion. This can't be right. Olivia doesn't design skyscrapers. I do, actually, I said quietly, speaking up for the first time. I've been lead architect on 7 major projects in the last 5 years, including the Anderson Tower. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. My father stared at the phone Tyler had passed to him, scrolling through images with growing disbelief. But you never said anything about any of this, my mother finally managed. I did. Mum, many times. You and Dad just never seemed interested. The words came out more calmly than I expected, years of practiced restraint holding back the emotion. Melissa was still scrolling through search results. Oh my God, there's so much. Here, look, Architect of the Year finalist, featured in Architectural Digest, keynote speaker at the International Design Conference. She looked up at me with genuine admiration. Olivia, you're incredible. Aunt Patricia leaned across the table to see the phone. Let me see that. Good heavens, that's really you? This says this tower cost $200 million. $212 million, actually, I corrected gently. We came in under budget. Uncle Robert choked slightly on his wine. Under budget? On a $200 million skyscraper? The phone continued its journey around the table, each family member's expression transforming as they scrolled through images of my work and accolades I had received. "Why didn't you tell us about any of this?" my father demanded, his voice caught between accusation and bewilderment. I took a deliberate sip of my water before answering. "I tried, Dad. Remember when I sent you the link to the Chicago Architecture Foundation's award ceremony? Or when I told you about being featured in Architectural Record? You said, and I quote, 'That's nice, honey, but let's talk about Tyler's new client.'" My father's face flushed. My mother jumped in, her voice taking on the defensive tone she used whenever family dynamics were questioned. "Well, you never made it clear how important these things were. How were we supposed to know this wasn't just some small project?" The email I sent literally said, "My design for a major skyscraper has been approved. Budget, $212 million. I'm not sure how much clearer I could have been." Emma grabbed the phone next, her eyes widening as she swiped through images. "This is insane. My sister designed this actual building. People live and work in something you created." "Thousands of people," I confirmed. "The residential units start on the 30th floor. Below that is commercial space, including a 5-star hotel." Cousin Mark, who had been particularly dismissive of my career over the years, peered over Emma's shoulder at the phone. "There's a video here, an interview." Melissa nodded eagerly. "Yes, Olivia gave an interview to Architecture Today about the innovative sustainability features. The building generates almost a third of its own power through integrated solar panels and wind turbines." Without asking, Emma pressed play on the video. My voice filled the sudden silence at the table, professional and confident as I explained the design philosophy behind the Anderson Tower. The camera panned over detailed models and renderings, then cut to footage of me on site during construction, hard hat on, directing a team of builders and engineers. "Is that the mayor of Chicago with you at the ribbon cutting?" Tyler asked, his voice strained. "Yes, and the governor was there too, though he's not in that shot." My mother's expression had transformed from shock to something else, a calculating look I recognized from childhood, the one that appeared when she needed to quickly revise her narrative to maintain her self-image. "Well, of course Olivia has always been talented," she said suddenly, as if this had been her position all along. "I always told everyone my daughter would design beautiful buildings someday." My father nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. I remember when she was little, always building things. I said to Diana, 'That girl's going to be an architect someday.' Didn't I say that, dear?" My mother nodded, reaching across the table as if to take credit for nurturing a talent she had actively dismissed. "We always encouraged your drawing. Olivia, remember the drafting table we got you for your 15th birthday? That was a desk, Mom, a regular desk for homework. I asked for a drafting table, but you got me a desk because you said architecture was just a phase." The revisionist history was happening in real time, each family member suddenly claiming to have always believed in my potential. Uncle Robert, who had suggested less than an hour ago that I consider an administrative position, now declared he had always seen something special in my sketches. Aunt Patricia, who had spent years asking when I would settle down and start a family instead of focusing on that job, was now telling Melissa about how she had always encouraged Olivia's career ambitions. Cousin Mark, scrolling through more search results, let out a low whistle. "Says here the Anderson Tower is valued at nearly $300 million now, and you designed that? Like, the whole thing?" "I led the design team, yes. The concept and primary design are mine. So, you must be making—" He trailed off, clearly, trying to calculate what the architect of such a building would earn. "I do fine," I said simply, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of a number. Throughout this entire exchange, I found myself watching Tyler's face. Unlike the others who had pivoted to proud support, my brother looked deeply uncomfortable, almost angry. He kept glancing between me and Melissa, who was still excitedly showing my mother more images of my work. "I can't believe I didn't connect the dots," Melissa was saying. "My father talked about working with a brilliant architect named Bennett on the Anderson Tower, but I never imagined it was you. He's going to be so excited when I tell him." "Your father is James Chen?" I asked, making the connection. "He did. Exceptional work on the cantilever design for the East Wing." Melissa beamed. "That's him. He said working on that building was one of the highlights of his career." As the reality of my success sank in around the table, I could see the family dynamic visibly shifting. Relatives who had barely spoken to me earlier were now hanging on my every word. My parents were rapidly reconstructing a fictional history, in which they had always supported my architectural ambitions, and Tyler was growing increasingly agitated, whispering something to Melissa, who was shaking her head in response. The waiter approached with dessert menus, but no one seemed interested anymore. The revelation had effectively derailed my father's birthday celebration, transforming it into an impromptu recognition of achievements they had spent years ignoring. "We should have a toast," Uncle Robert declared, raising his glass. "To Olivia, the most successful Bennett of her generation." I watched my father's smile tighten at those words. For as long as I could remember, that title had belonged unquestionably to Tyler. "To Olivia," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Everyone except Tyler, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. And in that moment, I had the distinct feeling that the evening's revelations were far from over. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of questions about my career, each family member attempting to reframe our relationship in light of my newly revealed success. My mother, ever the social architect, worked hardest to reconstruct the narrative. "Olivia always was our creative one," she told Melissa, as if sharing a cherished family truth rather than crafting it on the spot. "Richard and I knew from the time she built that elaborate dollhouse that she had a special talent for spatial design." The dollhouse she referenced had been a science project that received minimal acknowledgement when I brought home an A+. My father had glanced at it and said, "Nice box, Olivia," before turning back to Tyler's baseball statistics. "I always tried to nurture that creative spark," my mother continued, her revisionist history expanding with each glass of wine. "Remember how I enrolled you in that summer art program, Olivia?" What I remembered was begging to attend an architecture camp at MIT and being told it was too expensive and impractical, while Tyler's lacrosse camp and Emma's horse riding lessons were deemed essential investments. My father was handling the revelation differently, attempting to claim credit through genetics. "She gets the mathematical precision from my side of the family," he informed Uncle Robert. "My father was excellent with spatial reasoning, could build anything with his hands. Grandfather Bennett had indeed been handy, but my father had never before connected those traits to me or my career choice. Now suddenly they were part of a proud family tradition I was continuing." "Did you know about this?" I overheard Aunt Patricia whisper to Emma. "About Olivia being some big-shot architect?" Emma shook her head, looking genuinely stunned. "She mentioned designing some buildings, but I thought it was like renovations or small offices or something. Not famous skyscrapers." "Tyler must have known," Aunt Patricia concluded. "They always were close." They weren't entirely wrong. Tyler and I had been close as children before achievements and parental attention created a gulf between us. But his behaviour tonight suggested he knew more than he had let on. As dessert was served, the questions became more specific, family members now genuinely curious about my work. "How many people work under you?" Uncle Robert asked, his tone completely transformed from earlier condescension. "I lead a team of 17 architects and designers, plus project managers and support staff. And you're in charge of all of them, making the decisions." The surprise in his voice was impossible to miss. "That's generally what lead architect means, yes," I replied, unable to completely suppress the edge in my voice. My cousin Mark, who worked in pharmaceutical sales and had spent years making dismissive comments about my artistic hobby, was now particularly interested in the financial aspects. So a project like that Anderson Tower, the architect must get a pretty substantial fee, right? Like, what are we talking about percentage-wise? I met his gaze steadily. That's not something I discuss at family dinners, Mark. As the table talk continued, I excused myself to use the restroom. To my surprise, Melissa followed me. In the elegant marble bathroom, away from the family's prying ears, she turned to me with an apologetic expression. I hope I didn't create an uncomfortable situation out there. I was just so excited when I realised who you were professionally. I smiled at her, genuinely appreciative of her enthusiasm. You didn't do anything wrong. If anything, you just pulled back a curtain that's been hanging for a very long time. She hesitated, then said quietly, I think Tyler knew. About your success, I mean. What makes you say that? A few weeks ago, we were discussing career paths, and I mentioned my interest in architecture. He told me his sister was involved in that field, but immediately changed the subject. When I asked more, he said something about you working on small projects, and then started talking about his new case. I absorbed this information, turning it over in my mind. Did he ever mention the Anderson Tower to you? No, but... She hesitated. When my father mentioned working on it and spoke about the brilliant lead architect, Tyler changed the subject very quickly. I thought it was just because Dad was talking shop, but now I wonder... We were interrupted by the bathroom, door opening as my mother entered, her smile brittle and eyes calculating. There you two are. Everyone's wondering where you disappeared to. She approached the mirror, ostensibly to check her makeup, but clearly intent on interrupting our conversation. Melissa, dear, Tyler was looking for you. Melissa gave me a meaningful look before leaving, squeezing my arm gently as she passed. Left alone with my mother, I waited for whatever carefully constructed statement she had prepared during her approach to the bathroom. Olivia, she began, her voice taking on the hurt tone she used when she felt her authority as family matriarch was being challenged. I can't understand why you kept all this success a secret from us. We're your family. We should have been the first to celebrate your achievements. I met her eyes in the mirror. It wasn't a secret, Mum. I told you about every major project, every award, every publication. You and Dad just never showed interest. That's simply not true, she protested, turning from the mirror to face me directly. We always supported your career. Mum, when I won the Urban Design Excellence Award last year, I called to tell you. You said, "That's nice, dear," and then talked for 20 minutes about Emma's new boyfriend. Well, I didn't realise how important... It was, she insisted. You should have made it clearer. It was a nationally recognised award presented by the American Institute of Architects. How much clearer should I have been? My mother's expression hardened slightly. There's no need to take that tone. We've always been proud of all three of our children equally. The blatant revisionism was almost breathtaking. Mum, when was the last time you visited me in Chicago, or asked to see any of my projects, or even asked a detailed question about my work? She blinked rapidly. We've been very busy with Tyler's career and Emma's transitions, and you never seemed to need our support the way they did. And there it was, the truth beneath years of dismissal. I had been independent out of necessity, not choice, and that independence had been used to justify further neglect. When we returned to the table, the dynamic had shifted again. My father was now showing everyone his phone, where he had apparently found an architectural magazine article featuring my work. I remember seeing this issue, he announced as we approached. I said to Diana at the time, our Olivia is really making a name for herself. The blatant lie hung in the air between us. I knew for a fact he had never seen that article because, when I'd sent him the link, he had replied with a text clearly meant for my mother. Olivia sent another thing about buildings. Do I need to respond? As we prepared to leave the restaurant, I found myself cornered by Tyler, his expression tense and defensive. Why didn't you ever tell us about all this? He demanded in a low voice. I did tell you, Tyler. All of you. Repeatedly. You just weren't listening. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, you didn't make it sound like such a big deal. How was I supposed to know you were designing famous buildings? I studied my brother's face, seeing something beyond simple surprise. Did you know? About the Anderson Tower? A flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossed his features before he could mask it. I might have heard something about it at work. One of our clients mentioned an O.B. Bennett design. I didn't make the connection. The lie was transparent. Tyler had always been a poor liar, at least to me. Before I could press further, our father called everyone together for a family photo, insisting that I stand next to him, where you belong, my successful architect daughter. As cameras flashed, capturing this sudden revision of family hierarchy, I caught Melissa watching the proceedings with a thoughtful expression. In her eyes, I saw not just admiration for my work, but something deeper, a growing understanding of the complex dynamics she was marrying into. The morning after the dinner revelation brought a level of attention from my family I had never experienced before. My mother called at 7:30, asking if I would come over for breakfast before my afternoon flight back to Chicago. We need to talk as a family, she insisted. There's so much we apparently don't know about your life, Olivia. I agreed, partly out of curiosity about how they would handle this shift in perception, and partly because after years of invisibility, there was something undeniably satisfying about their sudden interest. The Bennett family home was unusually quiet when I arrived. Typically, family gatherings were centered around Tyler, with Emma as a close second. Today, all eyes turned to me when I entered the dining room where my parents, Tyler and Emma, were already seated. Melissa, I noticed, was absent. Melissa had a work call, Tyler explained tersely when he saw me looking for her. Something about a research deadline. My mother had prepared an elaborate breakfast spread, the kind usually reserved for Tyler's homecomings or major holidays. She hovered nervously, filling my coffee cup and offering me first choice of the pastries. We've been looking up your work online, my father began without preamble. That Anderson Tower is quite something. Why didn't you tell us you were working on something so significant? I did tell you, Dad. I sent emails with updates throughout the 3-year project. I called when we broke ground. I invited all of you to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. My mother frowned. I don't remember any invitation. I sent it to everyone's email and followed up with calls. Dad said you were busy with Emma's college graduation that weekend. Emma looked up sharply. My graduation was in May. When was the ribbon cutting? July, I replied. 2 months later. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. The silence stretched until my father cleared his throat. Well, perhaps we were travelling. That summer we went to Martha's Vineyard with Tyler when he closed. The Westbrook deal. That was August, Tyler corrected quietly, not meeting my eyes. Another uncomfortable silence fell. My mother busied herself rearranging pastries on a serving platter. The point is, she said finally, we didn't realise the scale of your accomplishments. You should have made it clearer. I set down my coffee cup carefully. What would have been clear enough, Mum? The emails with major project in the subject. Line, the press clippings I sent, the literal invitation to see the building. Don't take that tone, my father warned. We're trying to understand why there's been this miscommunication. It wasn't miscommunication, Dad. It was selective hearing. You and Mom have spent my entire life focusing on Tyler and Emma's achievements while minimising mine. That's not true, my mother protested. We've always treated all our children equally. Tyler snorted softly, surprising me. When everyone turned to look at him, he shrugged. "Mum, come on. We all know that's not true." My mother's face flushed. "What are you talking about? We've supported all three of you in your endeavours." "You supported what you wanted us to pursue," Tyler corrected. "You supported me in finance, because that's what Dad wanted. You supported Emma in whatever she did because she's the baby. But you never really supported Olivia in architecture because it wasn't part of the plan." I stared at my brother, stunned by this unexpected acknowledgement. My father shifted uncomfortably. "That's not fair, Tyler. We've always encouraged all your interests." "Did you?" Tyler challenged. "Because I remember when Olivia won that scholarship to the architectural summer program at MIT. You told her it was impractical, when what you really meant was it didn't fit your vision for her." My mother's composure was cracking. "We only wanted what was best for all of you. We couldn't have known Olivia would be so successful in architecture." "Why not?" I asked quietly. "I was top of my class. I won national student competitions. I had recommendations from industry leaders. What part of that suggested I wouldn't succeed?" My father's expression darkened. "Now listen here, young lady. We've always been proud of you. If we didn't make a fuss about every little award or project, it's because we didn't want you getting a big head. Success needs to be tempered with humility." "Is that why you made such a fuss over every one of Tyler's promotions, to ensure he wouldn't be humble?" Emma gasped at my directness. Tyler looked down at his plate. "That's different," my father insisted. "Tyler's in a competitive field where recognition is important for advancement." "And architecture isn't competitive," I challenged. "Dad, do you have any idea how few women lead major architectural projects? How many barriers I've had to break through to reach this position?" "Well, we didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "Every time I tried to share my world with you, you redirected the conversation to Tyler or Emma." My mother's hands trembled slightly as she refilled coffee cups no one had asked for. "I think you're being unfair, Olivia. We've always been interested in your life." "When was the last time you visited me in Chicago, Mum? When was the last time you asked about my work without immediately changing the subject?" She had no answer. Tyler cleared his throat. "I need to say something." He looked directly at me for the first time that morning. "I knew about the Anderson Tower. I knew about most of your projects." The admission hung in the air. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "A few years. One of our firm's clients is an investor in commercial real estate. He mentioned a brilliant architect named O.B. Bennett who was revolutionizing urban design." I connected the dots. "And you never said anything? Never congratulated me? Never corrected Mum and Dad when they dismissed my career?" Tyler had the grace to look ashamed. "No." "Why?" He hesitated, then spoke with reluctant honesty. "Because it was easier if you were the underachiever. It maintained the family balance." "Tyler!" my mother gasped. "It's true, Mum. We all had our roles. I was the successful one. Emma was the baby who needed protection, and Olivia was the middle child who would never quite measure up. That's how it always worked." "That's a terrible thing to say," my father protested. "Is it? Then why did you both panic whenever Olivia showed signs of outshining me? Why did you change the subject whenever she mentioned achievements? Why did you consistently minimize her success while exaggerating mine?" The question seemed to pierce my father's defences. His shoulders sagged slightly. "I suppose," he began slowly, "I suppose there's some truth to that. It wasn't conscious, but—" "It wasn't just unconscious, Dad," Tyler pressed. "You actively discouraged Olivia's career because it threatened the family narrative." My mother was crying, now silent tears tracking through her carefully applied makeup. "We never meant to hurt you, Olivia. We didn't understand the architecture world. It seemed so uncertain." "There's more," Tyler admitted, looking at me directly. I interviewed at Schaefer and Associates 5 years ago, for their legal department. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You interviewed at my firm and never told me. He nodded. I didn't get the position. The feedback was that I wasn't a good culture fit. When I found out later that you were rising quickly there, I resented it. I told Mom and Dad not to make a big deal about your career. You deliberately sabotaged my relationship with our parents. The hurt was sharper than I had expected. I didn't see it that way at the time. I told myself I was protecting the family dynamic. But yes, I suppose that's what I did. Emma, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I've been jealous of you for years. All eyes turned to her. You've always been so self-sufficient, so focused. I kept waiting for you to fail, so I would feel better about my own directionless life. But you never did. And instead of being inspired by you, I joined Mom and Dad in pretending your success wasn't happening. The admissions were coming now like a dam breaking. My Uncle Robert had apparently tried to invest in one of my early projects, but was discouraged by my father, who told him I was just starting out, and it would be throwing good money after bad. My mother had opened mail containing notification of a major award I'd won 3 years ago, read it, and then forgot to mention it to me or anyone else. My father had seen my name and photo in an architectural journal at his doctor's office, but convinced himself it must be a different Olivia Bennett. As each revelation emerged, a pattern became clear. My family had systematically undermined and ignored my success, not out of simple oversight, but as part of maintaining a carefully constructed family mythology in which Tyler was the star, Emma was the protected one, and I was the also-ran. Did you know, my father said quietly after a long silence, that my mother, your grandmother, was an accomplished pianist? She was offered a scholarship to Juilliard before she met your grandfather. I shook my head, surprised by this revelation about a grandmother who had died when I was young. She gave it up to raise a family. My father, your grandfather, used to say that was as it should be, that a woman's greatest accomplishment was her family, not her career. He stared into his coffee cup. I think perhaps I carried more of that thinking into our family than I realised. My mother wiped her eyes. And I let him. My own mother was always so proud of my brother's accomplishments, while treating my achievements as temporary stops on the way to marriage. I promised myself I wouldn't do that with my daughters, but somehow... You did exactly the same thing. I finished for her. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. The weight of generational patterns hung in the air between us. What I had experienced wasn't just about me. It was about an inherited template for family dynamics that had been unconsciously applied to a new generation. So what happens now? Emma asked into the heavy silence. How do we move forward from this? It was a question with no simple answer, but for the first time in my life, I felt like my family might actually be ready to hear mine. I awoke the next morning to the sound of my phone ringing. Daniel Schaefer, the founding partner of my firm, was calling with news that couldn't wait. Olivia, the Singapore committee has moved up their timeline. They want final approval on preliminary designs by next Friday, which means we need you back in Chicago for meetings starting Monday. I glanced at my packed suitcase, already prepared for my scheduled afternoon flight. I'll be there, Daniel. No problem. There's more, he continued. The Venice Biennale committee reached out. They want the Anderson Tower featured in next. Year's exhibition with you presenting. It's a tremendous honour. And international exposure for the firm, I finished. I'd be happy to do it. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, contemplating how differently this call would have played out just 2 days ago. Before Melissa's Google search, I would have kept this news to myself, knowing my family would show little interest. Now I found myself wondering how they would react, and whether I even wanted to share it with them. Downstairs, my family was gathered for breakfast. The atmosphere was noticeably different, charged with an awkward awareness of our previous day's confrontation. My mother had prepared an elaborate spread, her typical response to family tension. "Good morning, Olivia," she said with forced brightness. "I made your favourite blueberry pancakes." They hadn't been my favourite since I was 12, but I thanked her anyway and took a seat at the table. Tyler entered a moment later, his expression guarded. "Morning," he muttered, pouring himself coffee. Emma, surprisingly, was already engaged in conversation with my father about architecture, a topic I had never heard them discuss before. "So the structural support has to be calculated based on the total weight?" she was asking. My father nodded, looking slightly out of his depth. "That's my understanding. Olivia would know better, of course." All eyes turned to me expectantly. It was a strange sensation, being looked to as an authority in my family. "Yes, load-bearing calculations are fundamental," I confirmed. "But modern architecture involves complex systems working together, structural integrity, sustainability features, aesthetic considerations, practical usage patterns." "It sounds fascinating," Emma said, with what appeared to be genuine interest. "I've been looking at your designs online. They're really beautiful." The compliment, simple as it was, felt monumental coming from my sister. "Thank you, Emma." My phone buzzed with another call, this time from the architectural magazine that had featured the Anderson Tower. I excused myself to take it in the living room. "Ms. Bennett, this is Catherine Walsh from Architectural Horizons. We're doing a feature on innovative family dynamics in design. We understand your father recently celebrated his 60th birthday with a family gathering, and we'd love to interview all of you about the design legacy in your family." I nearly laughed at the irony. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. There's no design legacy in my family. I'm the only architect." "Oh," she sounded confused. "We received information that your family has been instrumental in your design philosophy, something about a generational influence." I realised someone in my family must have reached out to the magazine, attempting to insert themselves into my professional narrative now that it had proven impressive. "Who contacted you about this?" I asked directly. "I believe it was a Diana Bennett. She mentioned a family connection to architectural appreciation going back generations." My mother, of course. When I returned to the kitchen, I found my family in what appeared to be a planning session. "We should all go to Chicago next month," my mother was saying. "See Olivia's buildings in person. Maybe she could arrange a special tour." My father nodded enthusiastically. "And we should have a family dinner at that restaurant on the 60th floor of your tower. What was it called? The one in the magazine?" "Apex," I supplied, taking my seat. "And it's not my tower. It belongs to Westfield Development. I just designed it." "Still," my mother pressed, "you must have connections, special access." I studied her eager face, recognising the familiar pattern, looking for ways to benefit from a connection rather than genuinely appreciating the connection itself. "Mum, did you contact Architectural Horizons magazine about a family interview?" Her cheeks flushed slightly. "Well, yes. I thought it would be nice publicity for you." "For me, or for the family?" I challenged gently. Tyler cleared his throat. "Olivia, we're just trying to be supportive now that we understand the significance of your work." "Are you? Because it feels like you're trying to co-opt my success after years of ignoring it." The table fell silent. My mother's expression crumpled slightly. "That's not fair," my father began, but I cut him off. "What's not fair is spending. My entire career having my achievements dismissed, only to have you all suddenly want to be associated with them when they prove impressive to outsiders." Emma looked down at her plate. "She's right." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we've acknowledged we made mistakes. We're trying to do better." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. But doing better doesn't mean swinging from complete disinterest to excessive involvement overnight. It means respecting the boundaries I've established and earning back trust, gradually. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. We just want to be part of your life, Olivia, to make up for lost time. And I want you in my life, Mum, but on authentic terms, not performative ones. My phone buzzed again, a text from Melissa. Can we talk before you leave? Coffee at Parker's in an hour. I texted back a quick affirmative, then turned to my family. I need to be clear about something. I'm glad we're having these conversations, but real change takes time. I'm not going to suddenly share every aspect of my professional life with you, and I'm not going to facilitate your insertion into my career narrative. What does that mean exactly? My father asked, his tone defensive. It means I won't be doing a family interview with Architectural Horizons. It means I won't be arranging special access or tours until I feel our relationship is on more solid ground. And it means I expect you to respect my professional accomplishments without trying to claim credit for them. Tyler looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Emma nodded slowly, seeming to understand. My mother's lips thinned with disapproval. I think you're being unnecessarily harsh, Olivia. We're just trying to show interest. There's a difference between showing interest and attempting to rewrite history, Mum. Before she could respond, my phone rang again. This time it was the project manager for the Singapore development. I need to take this, I said, standing up. It's work. As I stepped away to take the call, I heard Tyler say to my parents, This is what I mean about family harmony. Olivia needs to meet us halfway here. The call was brief but important, confirmation of Monday's meetings and a request for specific design modifications before then. When I returned to the kitchen, the atmosphere had changed again. My family had clearly been discussing me in my absence. Olivia, my father began in his authoritative tone, we've been talking, and while we understand you feel overlooked, family harmony requires compromise. Tyler has suggested a family interview might be a good way to reset our relationship publicly. I glanced at my brother, recognizing the familiar strategy, using family harmony as leverage to get what he wanted. I have to go meet Melissa for coffee before my flight, I said, deliberately not engaging with my father's statement. Thank you for breakfast, Mom. But what about the interview? My mother pressed. Catherine from the magazine is expecting us to confirm. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face my family. For a moment I saw them clearly. My father accustomed to authority, my mother desperate to maintain appearances, Tyler attempting to manage the situation to his advantage, and Emma watching uncertainly from the sidelines. I'll handle the magazine, I said firmly, and we'll continue this conversation another time. But I want to be very clear. I will not participate in any family interview that misrepresents our history or relationship. I left them sitting in stunned silence, feeling oddly liberated by this small but significant act of boundary setting. Parker's coffee was quiet when I arrived. Melissa was already there, 2 cups on the table in front of her. I got you a latte, she said as I sat down. Tyler mentioned it was your usual. Thanks, I replied, surprisingly touched that my brother had remembered such a detail. I wanted to talk to you before you left, Melissa began, her expression earnest. First, to apologize if my Google search caused family drama. I smiled. You have nothing to apologize for. If anything, you helped bring long-standing issues into the open. She nodded, seeming relieved. I also wanted you to know that I had no idea how your family perceived you until that dinner. The way Tyler described you, it didn't match with what I've seen at all. And what have you seen? I asked, curious about her perception. A brilliant, accomplished woman whose family somehow failed to recognize her worth. She hesitated, then added, It makes me question other narratives Tyler has shared about family dynamics. The implication was clear. If Tyler had misrepresented, Me so fundamentally, what else might he have distorted? Family relationships are complicated, I offered, not wanting to damage her relationship with my brother despite our issues. They are, she agreed, but they should be built on truth and mutual respect. She took a sip of her coffee. My father was so excited when I told him I'd met you. He said working with you on the Anderson Tower was one of the highlights of his career. Your father is exceptionally talented. The cantilever solution he developed for the East Wing was innovative. She smiled. He said the same about your design integration. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing naturally. From architecture to family dynamics to her research work in medical imaging, I found myself genuinely liking this woman who had unwittingly catalyzed such significant change in my family relationships. As we prepared to leave, Melissa hesitated. Olivia, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How do you build authentic relationships when people have preconceived notions about you? The question resonated on multiple levels: professional, personal, familial. I think you start by being true to yourself, even when it's uncomfortable for others, I replied after consideration. And you recognize that authentic relationships can handle truth, even difficult truth. She nodded thoughtfully. That's what I believe too. She hesitated, then added, I hope, whatever happens with your family dynamics, that you and I can develop a real friendship. As I headed to the airport later that afternoon, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, lingering hurt, from years of dismissal, cautious hope for potential change, and a new clarity about my own boundaries. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. I've enrolled in an intro to architecture class at the community college, not trying to copy you, just inspired to learn more about what you do. It was a small step, but perhaps a meaningful one. Another text arrived from my mother. The magazine understood you're too busy for a family feature. We respect your decision. Your father and I are trying to understand. Progress, however incremental. The final text came as I was boarding my flight, a message from Tyler that simply read, We need to talk, not about the magazine, about the firm interview 5 years ago. There's more to that story. I put my phone in airplane mode, leaving that conversation for another day. As the plane took off, I looked down at the receding city of my childhood, reflecting that relationships, like buildings, require solid foundations to withstand pressure. Perhaps now, with truth exposed, we could begin to rebuild on more authentic ground. 6 months after the revelation at my father's birthday dinner, I stood on stage at the International Design Awards in London, accepting the prestigious Vanguard Prize for Innovative Urban Architecture. The Anderson Tower had not only transformed Chicago's skyline, but had also set new standards for sustainable design in major metropolitan areas. As I concluded my acceptance speech, I glanced toward the audience where, somewhat surreally, my entire family sat watching. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. My father sat straight-backed and attentive. Emma beamed proudly, and Tyler, seated beside Melissa, now his wife of 3 months, offered a small but genuine nod of acknowledgement. Their presence represented not a complete healing of our family dynamics, but a work in progress, one that had required difficult conversations, boundary setting, and gradual rebuilding of trust. The months following the Google revelation had brought significant changes. After our confrontation, Tyler had finally shared the full story about his interview at my firm. His rejection hadn't been about cultural fit, as he'd claimed. He had actually name-dropped me during the interview, suggesting that as his sister, I could put in a good word for special consideration. The hiring committee said that kind of nepotistic thinking was exactly what they didn't want in their legal department, he had admitted during a tense but honest conversation over Zoom. I was humiliated, and instead of owning my mistake, I blamed you for it. My parents had struggled most with adjusting their perspectives. Years of ingrained patterns proved difficult to change overnight. My mother still occasionally slipped, into her old habits of diminishment, though now she would catch herself and apologise. My father vacillated between excessive pride, my daughter the famous architect, and awkward attempts to connect with my professional world that he had previously ignored. Emma, surprisingly, had made the most genuine effort at transformation. She had completed her Introduction to Architecture course and discovered a genuine interest in design, not to compete with me, but as her own authentic exploration. She had even applied for a marketing position at a small architecture firm in Boston, wanting to combine her existing skills with her new interest. As we gathered for dinner after the awards ceremony at an elegant restaurant overlooking the Thames, I observed the subtle shifts in our family dynamic. The conversation no longer revolved exclusively around Tyler's accomplishments. My parents asked thoughtful questions about my current projects. Emma enthusiastically shared her experiences working with architects from a marketing perspective. The Singapore Plaza is entering final design phase, I explained when my father inquired about my current work. Construction should begin next spring. That's the $350 million project, right? He clarified, showing he had been paying attention to details I'd shared in recent months. Yes, it's actually expanded to $400 million with the addition of the Eastern Wing. My mother, who had been consulting her phone, looked up with a smile. I've been reading about sustainable design trends. The article mentioned your approach to integrated green spaces as revolutionary. 6 months ago, I would have been shocked by her awareness of industry terminology. Now, it represented her genuine efforts to engage with my world. Tyler, who had been relatively quiet, finally spoke up. I referred one of my firm's clients to your team last month, a commercial development in Seattle. I nodded, acknowledging this professional olive branch. Lisa Chung mentioned that. We're reviewing the preliminary requirements now. Melissa squeezed Tyler's hand supportively. Since their wedding, where I had served as a bridesmaid rather than the distant relation I might have been before, she had consistently acted as a positive influence. Her presence seemed to temper Tyler's competitive instincts and encourage more authentic communication. Olivia is designing our vacation home, Emma announced suddenly, glancing at me with a smile. I returned her smile, appreciating her enthusiasm for what had started as a simple favour, helping her sketch some ideas for a modest lakeside cabin she hoped to build someday, and had evolved into a small but meaningful collaboration between sisters. It's just a concept design at this point, I clarified, but it's been fun to work on something more intimate in scale. My father raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast to Olivia, whose talent we failed to recognise for too long. We're proud of you, not just for your professional success, but for your perseverance despite our shortcomings. The acknowledgement, imperfect but sincere, represented progress I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. As dinner concluded, my mother pulled me aside. There's something I've been meaning to give you, she said, removing a small package from her purse. I found this while going through some old storage boxes. Inside was a faded blue ribbon attached to a small medal. I recognised it immediately, the prize from my first architectural design contest in 7th grade. I kept it, she said softly. All these years. I didn't make a fuss about it then because... She hesitated. Because my mother always told me not to encourage impractical dreams, but I kept it. The small token represented both past failures and present efforts at reconciliation. I hugged her briefly, accepting both the gift and its complicated implications. Later that evening, as the family gathered in the hotel lobby before dispersing to our rooms, my father approached me privately. I saw your design for the children's hospital expansion in Chicago, he said, his voice gruff with emotion he typically avoided displaying. The way you incorporated natural light into the recovery rooms, it's not just architecturally impressive, it's kind. Coming from my father, this recognition of the human element of my work, not just its technical or financial merits, felt like a breakthrough. "Thank you, Dad." "I was wrong," he continued, looking uncomfortable but determined. "About architecture being impractical, about a lot of things. I hope you know that I'm proud of the woman you've become, not because of awards or magazine features, but because you stayed true to your vision even when your own family couldn't see it." As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The family dynamics weren't perfect, likely never would be. Old patterns sometimes re-emerged during stress or conflict. Trust was still being rebuilt, conversation by conversation. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer invisible within my own family. My successes were no longer minimized or ignored, and perhaps most importantly, I had established boundaries that allowed me to maintain my professional identity separate from family expectations or narratives. The following morning, I met Melissa for coffee before my flight back to Chicago. She had become, unexpectedly, both a sister-in-law and a friend. "How are you feeling after everything?" she asked. "The award, the family dinner, all of it." I considered her question carefully. "Like I'm finally visible, not just to my family, but to myself in relation to them. I spent so many years compartmentalizing, the successful architect in Chicago, the disappointing daughter in Boston. It's still strange to have those worlds collide, but also freeing." She nodded, understanding. "Tyler's still working through some things. Competition is deeply ingrained in him, but he's trying in his way." "I know, we all are." As I prepared to leave, Melissa hesitated, then asked, "Do you think families can truly change, or do we just learn to manage the dynamics better?" The question resonated with my thoughts of the previous night. "I think real change is possible, but it's gradual and imperfect. The patterns run deep, sometimes across generations. But awareness is the first step, and we've at least achieved that." My final stop before the airport was the construction site of a new civic centre I had designed in London's East End. As I stood reviewing the progress with the site manager, I noticed my name prominently displayed on the project sign, "Designed by Olivia Bennett, OB Designs." Not hidden behind initials or a company name, but fully visible, just as I now was, within my own family, imperfectly seen, still occasionally misunderstood, but no longer invisible. Have you ever had a moment when someone outside your family circle finally made your relatives see you differently? My journey from family nobody to recognised professional didn't happen overnight, and honestly, the relationships are still works in progress. Family dynamics run deep, and sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to break through patterns we've all been stuck in for years. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family recognition, or the lack of it. Has someone ever Googled you at a family gathering and changed everything? Leave a comment below sharing your story of finally being seen by family who overlooked you. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more authentic family stories, and share this with someone who might need to hear that their value isn't determined by their family's perception. Thank you for being part of this community where we can talk honestly about the complicated journey toward authentic family relationships. Until next time, remember that sometimes the family that truly sees you isn't the one you're born into, it's the one you build yourself.